So if you've been following me these weeks, I've been speaking a lot about feminine and masculine, left and right brain, that this is a time of integration. Today, I want to go deeper into emotions, specifically anger, because I think it's an emotion that is really misunderstood and there's a lot of judgment around it. And I also want to go into the art of forgiveness and what this process of integration is when it comes to our emotions, because we're going through such massive shifts. And the biggest part of that shift is we're literally reorienting what it is to be a human being. We're moving away from being cerebrally based, like brain focused beings, into holistic beings, which means that, as I spoke about last week, mind, heart, and gut brain have to be in alignment. But I want to go deeper into what does it mean when we literally shift our center of gravity into a totally different state of being? And I've had some really beautiful synchronicities around things kind of lining up. And I always know when similar messages are coming through from people that I really respect and admire, that it's like, okay, I'm tapping into something. So I want to dive into all of these themes and we'll see what else comes up. Let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So part of recognizing that we are holistic beings, or that life isn't so fragmented or linear, there's no hard edges, there's no straight lines, right? In the universe, there are no straight lines, but because we've been living in left brain, things have gotten very logical and rational and linear and compartmentalized, and what that part of the brain is good at, right? But too much of a good thing isn't so good, right? So when we look at ourselves more holistically and we look at life more well-rounded, what we see is that there's purpose, or dare I say reason, for everything. It's not random chaos, as a lot of people have been told, right? That we've been told this. There's actually a beautiful orchestration of all things. If you look at the Fibonacci spiral that is in all the sacred geometry that is in all plants, that is in all things, there really is like a divine order to everything. Now, why am I saying this? Because similarly with our human experience and when it comes to our emotions, we might think that something is random, but it's not. There's a reason for it. And instead of, let me back up. I was going to say, instead of, seeing it as something that's random and separating ourselves from it and trying to get rid of it, because that's what people tend to do, we need to understand how everything is threaded together and how, there's layers, right? So underneath anger, there's always something else. And the reason why we need to look at things holistically is to understand this interwoven part of it, of all things. So I've been reading The Gene Keys by Richard Rudd, and I'm really enjoying it. There's a lot of his work that really resonates with mine, I think. And he also speaks about certain progressions that I really enjoy. And he said something in his book, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but he said, it's a problem that we think that we're not a part of nature. It's even a problem if we think we are just a part of nature. Because the truth is, we are nature. We are the cosmos. We are God. I've been talking about these things, right? This illusion of separation, which of course comes into this realm because there's duality, but what we're trying to return home to, what we're working on, I don't like any of these words, what we're moving towards is a coming back home into wholeness, recognizing that we are not separate from all things. We are but a drop of the same ocean, right? So I know I've been preaching a lot about this, but integration is inclusion. Inclusion is recognizing that we are a part of all things, not even just a part, we are all things. And this goes back to what I said several episodes ago of when we recognize as something that is us, a part of us, then we care about it, right? When it's easier to not care about something that's separate. So judgment is a huge obstacle in this, right? Because judgment goes, well, I don't like this. This isn't okay. It shouldn't be like that. That's not good. That's bad. That's wrong. That is automatically pulling us away and out of wholeness. And what is wholeness? Wholeness is just, it's the isness of existence, right? It's like all of this is consciousness. All of this is birthed from the same point of creation. So, when we zoom out, there is no good, bad, right, wrong. And as I say that, there is a purpose for duality. There's a purpose for polarity, and that might always exist, even if there isn't duality outside of this realm. There is a kind of polarity, right? There is, I want to say there's always a point of tension, which basically just means there's a point of reflection so that the self can see the other and the other can see the self. And it's this like mirror reflection, and it's in the reflection that we grow and evolve. That's why relationships, whether it's family, friends, work, but most especially romantic relationships, because they trigger all of our interrelational shit. That's why they are such fertile ground, fertile soil for growth, because it will really show you like what is going on inside of you, and especially what are the parts that you don't want to look at. It ends up being a reflection. So let's zoom into anger, because anger is one of those things where we've rejected anger a lot. And I want to really clarify that I'm not condoning anger. I'm not saying it's great, go be angry at everyone. Just like, blah. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that all emotions are messengers. Anger, particularly, is very much connected to our life force energy and tends to arise when we are feeling frustrated, upset, confused, I almost want to say in disalignment, but I don't mean that in a judgmental way, but in disalignment from what our spirit is desiring, is wanting. So I'll give you personal examples just from my own experience. And of course, yours might be very different. I recognize that anger comes up for me when I'm frustrated in my life. When something really feels like it's not right. So at the end of my marriage, I had a tremendous amount of anger that came up. And it was because for years, I was trying to make something work that, I had clearly outgrown, or had clearly kind of just, it wasn't the right container anymore. And I'm a person that kind of sees things to the very end, almost exhausts it, just because I will give the benefit of the doubt. I will work on something. I'm very dedicated and like committed in that way. But what can simultaneously happen is that, like I'm learning this through my gene keys, that I can compromise too much. And so anger can come in as an alert to say, you're not listening to yourself. You're not listening to your spirit and your oversoul. You need to pay attention over here, right? So that was on a like pretty serious scale, right? That is life altering, life changing when you make a decision of like, this doesn't work for me anymore. I'm not happy. I've tried, but I'm not happy. And so anger will, if you didn't get the discomfort and the like, this doesn't feel so good and something's not right, and you try to work through it, if you didn't hear that, and if you didn't hear the sadness, and if you didn't hear the kind of depression that can come when we ignore our emotions and our feelings and ultimately our truth, So truth. Then anger is like, all right, I'm going to come help you out. And I'm going to really I'm going to point the light, the flashlight, and then invite you to go deeper in and see, why am I angry? This is why when I'm working with clients, the first point of contact with emotions is to ask them, why are they feeling this way? Okay, so anger, why are you so angry? Fear, why are you so afraid? What are you scared of? You ask it the very thing that it is presenting to you. Why are you feeling this way? And it will have a story to tell you. And it will include other emotions. And then you go into those emotions, right? It's all a language. This is how we build emotional intelligence, is that we're learning the language of our emotional body. And our feeling body, I heard this yesterday, maybe it was from Richard Rudd, that was saying our feeling body is our astral body. Because if you think about it, feeling, you can feel someone from across the world. I've always been very, if anything, I'm very clairsentient more than the other clairs. I'm very clairsentient, and I can feel when someone is thinking about me. And so then I'll get the text, or I'll get the email from a client, or I'll hear from someone, or something, I will feel it in my field first. So feelings go beyond space and time, basically. And so this is part of also, as I said in the beginning, we're reorganizing, we're reorienting our center of gravity and our focus, and we're dropping down into our feeling body, because we have got at least 5 bodies, right? The physical, the emotional, the cellular, the auric, it ripples out, right? We're not just this physical body. So whenever we're dealing with an emotion, we always want to be curious as to why it's there. Now, on a much smaller scale, another example that kind of made me think about, I shared a video on my social media about this, was I have a thing, like one of my challenges is in some ways I'm very intuitive. But one of the areas that I really struggle is making decisions, like making kind of mundane decisions. In some parts of my life, I'm very good at making decisions. I'm very clear. And in other parts, I really struggle. And in the past, it would really overwhelm me. But what happens is, so here's the example. I was going to an event that was about, I don't know, just a little bit under an hour from where I live. And there was 3 different routes that I could take. And the quickest route there was a road closure. There was a detour, basically. And I didn't know how long the detour could take. So there's another way that actually the event was saying, go through this town instead. And that took longer. And there's always a bit of a possibility for traffic. So my first thought was just go the fast way and deal with the detour. That was the first quick one. And I feel like I've already mentioned this story, but I think it's because I recorded a video about it. The second thought that came in was logic. Maybe I did share this last week, but I'm going to quickly repeat this story. You can fast forward if you already heard it. The second thought, the third thought, the fourth thought is logic, right? But you don't know about the detour, so go the way that you went last time. You know the way, blah, 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 blah. So I went that way, and not only did I hit traffic, but there was an accident. And so I sat in traffic, stop, start for a half an hour at least, and my poor left calf was in agony from the clutch. And I got really angry. I got really angry at myself. For 2 reasons. One was because I was I went against my intuition. Why? Why don't I trust my intuition? Why didn't I just make that choice? Why didn't I go with the first thought? Because your first thought tends to always be your intuition, and the thoughts that come after is your brain that is trying to logically make sense of it. The second reason why so much anger came up is because I was frustrated, and I was frustrated with what was going on in my life, that I didn't have time for myself, that I was going to this event, and one of the biggest one of the parts of the event that I wanted to go to most was a class that kicked it off, that started it off. And at this rate, I was going to be super late. I was going to basically miss at least half the class. And there's the part that's like, it's okay. Maybe this is all going to be okay. Maybe you'll get there and it'll start late. That's the soul. That's the overseer, right? That can see all of this stuff. And that tends to have a very calm voice. But my human reaction was just like rage. Firstly, at myself, berating myself. Like, why can't I just frickin' listen to my intuition and go with that and trust that? And then that opens up a whole kettle of fish, right? Can of worms, whatever you want to call it. But then it was this story of my frustration that was coming up of just, the amount of responsibility that I have, that I hadn't had a day off in over 2 months. There's a whole story. And remember what I said, the story brings us into greater suffering, but the story is also part of what triggers the emotion. And so, one of the things that I really learned, and this goes into the art of forgiveness, is like, it's so humbling to be human, because it's so, in many ways, it's very simple. We all share very similar feelings. Our stories are just different. But it's also complex because, it's layered. And sometimes we do overcomplicate things, and we're habitual. And the way that the brain works is very, very habitual. My friend is learning, she's training, and I've had a couple sessions with her with something called, what is it called? Brainwave recursive therapy. She was basically saying that, once you have a reaction, like, you could never have caught it because it already started up like way before you were even aware of it. And of course, in my work, it's trying to get as close to that point of awareness where you can catch as soon as possible when you go into a triggered state. But basically, this is like properly rewiring the brain. It's similar but different, obviously a different technique, but a similar way of thinking that brain spotting is, which I trained the first level in. So sometimes we just have to literally bypass the neocortex and just like, recalibrate so that we don't have to have that same triggered response. So what is the point of all of this? Anger is an alert. It's a messenger. Now, the problem is that we often get stuck just there. We get stuck just in the anger, just in the reaction. And then we might, like what happened to me when I was in the car after, there was the berating myself, which I'm a bit of a paradox in that way, or an oxymoron, because I actually, in many ways, can be very, very non-judgmental. I've learned to not be judgmental about certain things. I accept my humanity. And even in that situation, I was accepting of my humanity, but I was berating the fact that I haven't figured out yet how to make decisions and how to trust them and how to really trust my intuition when it comes to decisions. Something in me has been taught that it's like, you don't want to make the wrong decision because of the effort that it takes or the consequence of it. And so I'm working on that. But I think, like part of this looking at things through the lens of wholeness, holistic, is to not get stuck in the reprimanding of ourselves for having the reaction. Because I easily could have gone into Jesus Christ, like, I'm a shit person, or, why am I so full of anger? Why am I reacting this? Or like, I'm aware that it's happening, but why can't I control it? And actually, when you just come into a place of, sometimes you really just have to feel it. Sometimes you just really have to feel it and because it is life force energy. When we suppress anger, we become depressed. And then what happens is the anger comes out like with a vengeance when it has the opportunity to, because it finds like a crack through the system and it's like, ooh, I'm going to explode there. And it's not even to do with just that, but it's like my anger from everything else in my life, right? All the ways in which I've stuffed it down and suppressed it and repressed it and told it it's not okay to feel. Whereas, like with any emotion, what would happen if we actually just allowed it? in the moment. Now, when I say allow it, again, I'm going to clarify, I don't mean unleash your rage on someone else. I mean, like it's true self-responsibility, true holding it within your experience. I'm feeling this anger. I'm feeling this rage. I'm feeling whatever it is. Now, you might be in a partnership where you need to express that to your partner. There might be a valid reason for that, but it's not, you're doing this and when you do, it's not, that actually doesn't help us to feel and be seen, heard, and understood. Because what's happening is we're attacking and all their energy is going to go towards defending. So this is normally what we interpret as anger is this battle, right? It's an argument. It's violent. It's lashing out. I mean, God, all you need to do is go onto the internet and just see how people are really disowning their anger and throwing it upon other people. And then it turns into righteousness and all of these other things, right? It gets really shadowy and convoluted. But there is a power when we really own and claim, this is mine. This is my emotion. This is my feeling. This is what's going on for me. And you sometimes when you really go into the passion of anger, and let's say let's say you're on your own and you're driving in your car. So there's not, unless you're going to like run into someone else, you're kind of in a safe little bubble, right? But if you really gave yourself permission to just like get it out, like really raw, at the end of that, there's an exhalation. And sometimes anger is there because it needs to crack the shell and the hardness and the armor and the barriers and all of the stuff that you've put up about, that keeps you from, it's between you and the part that's tender that actually really needs your attention. That you're like, yeah, no, I'm not going to look at that. Or I can't deal with that right now. Or I don't have the time for that. Or that scares me too much to look at that. God, I might have to leave this relationship. I might have to leave this job. I might have to, accept the fact that I'm in complete service right now and I don't have any time to myself. Whatever the story is, there actually is the landing in the recognition of what's really going on for you on a deeper level. And the anger is just like the image that comes into my mind is, those like huge balls of, I don't know, steel, metal, something that like when they go to demolish something, it just, from the crane, it just gets swung and it's just like, poof, breaks into the wall or the building and just crumbles it, puts a hole into it. In the most loving way, sometimes I feel like anger, when it hasn't, when all the emotions and the messages haven't been heard before, that's what it's coming in to do. It's like, okay, we're going to crack you open. We're going to crack you open so that you have to feel. Life is not meant, being human is not meant to be logical and linear. That's just a tool. Right? And this is part of the reorientation and the reorganizing and the shifting of our center of gravity. And what I mean by that is we've made the mind our center of gravity. We've made that the most important thing. I'm going to repeat it. I know I've said it before. But there are far more intricate, wise, expansive systems of intelligence in our body. And like there's far more neural pathways that are shooting from the heart to the brain than from the brain to the heart. And there's a whole network that goes on in the gut and in the solar plexus. I mean, it's we've been looking at ourselves in parts rather than like seeing the entire system. And it's really beautiful when you see like the nervous system of a human being. It really mimics like the roots and the lines of like a tree or leaves. This is again where you go back to we are nature. How we've seen like if you see the inside of our body, it mimics it's like the X-ray, not the X-ray of that, but like the drawing of that would mimic something in nature. Like the eye is like the galaxy, the universe, right? The veins that are like the veins in the leaves, that are like the veins of electricity, lightning. you will see correlations everywhere. Why? Because we are all cut from the same fabric. There is no separation. There is no difference. There's just a different expression of that. And we get to be this unique expression of consciousness in this form. I was listening to Pam Gregory, and she was saying that she's having to really, what's the word? Oh God, translate astrology in a very different way. And one of the things that she said, so like she's been doing this for, I don't know, more than 30 years, I think. And she's saying she's literally having to deliver the message differently because things are changing so rapidly. But one of the things that she was talking about recently is, she says, we really need to see ourselves not just as human beings, but actually as spiritual beings. This is coming into the greater expansive truth of who we actually are. That we're not just this body, that we're not just human. The human and the body is the vehicle, as I've been talking about. I apologize for repeating, but sometimes we need to hear things several times, because especially if we've been habituated in a way for hundreds, if not thousands of years, it takes, I think someone said you have to hear it at least 7 times. I would say it's more than that. Or at least 7 times before you actually start paying attention to it and going, oh, okay, maybe I should think about this or do something about this. Or, they use that in marketing. You have to see something 7 times to be able to click on it and make a choice. I'm not here to market anything, but you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. The Gene Keys, I think Richard Rudd has such a beautiful poetic way about talking about just being this whole existence. It's not just being human. I mean, it's a beautiful way about talking about being human, but how he integrates it with all that is so beautiful. It's so exquisite, and it really deeply resonates with a lot of the ways in which I feel like the message that I'm trying to convey as well. One of the things that he said in his book that I really loved is that we're moving from chaos to cosmos. So it's from, entropy to syntropy, I think it is. I don't know if I got that word right, but from everything being random and moving towards, chaos to actually moving into there is divine order to all things. This goes back to there's always a reason. There's always a purpose. There's always some kind of interconnection that's one thing is connected to another. It's not just random. This is why I don't necessarily believe things are a coincidence. To me, it's more of a synchronicity. When we recognize, we see, oh, the orchestration of my life. There we go. I caught it, right? And I think once we start to see that all of this is like this beautiful harmonic of all of these things. And I don't just mean harmonic is beautiful, you're beautiful, happy, and positive all the time. The harmonic is the inclusion of all things, that you are not separating and severing and fragmenting parts of yourself. And so therefore you're not fragmenting and separating parts of you from nature or from other people or from the cosmos. We recognize, we don't homogenize. The irony is that as you become more of an individual, you will become more connected to all that is. Why? Because as you become more authentic, your frequency will rise into that frequency of all that is. Because the most powerful thing that you can embody is your authenticity. Authenticity, I shared this, has the strongest magnetic field, the strongest vibration, more than love. We've been a homogenized culture. Everyone wears the same jeans. They have the same car, the same cookie cutter house, right? You can go deeper into why all of that is there, how it's evolved into that. But what we're doing right now is we're moving away from that kind of timeline of collective thinking into more individual thinking. But again, this is the paradox, and this is the difference. And there's such a distinction that needs to be made here. Individuality does not mean selfishness. because we're also recognizing that. So here's the thing. When you come into your authenticity and you come into the unique fingerprint, stamp of who you are, because you're aligning to your true self and your higher self, you will naturally fall into and embody a state of love. And through that love and compassion, everything that goes with that, you will be more caring and more connected to others and to the planet. And then you will not be able to be selfish. The reason why people are selfish is because they're coming from the paradigm of fear. They're coming from the paradigm of judgment and separation. And you are not me and I'm against you. And this opinion is better than that opinion. And that's right and that's wrong. And you should be punished. You should be praised. It gets stuck in the prison of duality rather than the beautiful reflection that duality can show us as a means to evolve. So as I spoke about last week, the most important thing you can do is to come back home to yourself and to really come back into your authenticity. Because as Jung said, this is one of my favorite quotes, the gift of a lifetime is to be who you truly are. Because otherwise you would have come in as someone else. We would all be the same. How boring would that be, right? So if we can really, again, we're moving out of victim mentality. We're coming into wholeness, which when we integrate and accept all parts of our humanity as a part of humanity, of our humanity, and that it's okay and that there's nothing wrong and we can let go of the judgment, we come into acceptance, which naturally leads us into self-love, which naturally makes us feel more at peace and more whole within ourselves. And then when we're feeling more whole, it's like that expansion is infinite. It's limitless, right? And then we go back to being parts of all thing, a part of all thing or all that is. Not even just a part, but we almost bleed into. But the irony is that it takes moving through your individuality to be more connected as a force of unity. Right? If you're not within your individuality and your authenticity, you're going to be in that fragmentation and separatism. And that, in its worst expression is judgment and hatred. Me against you, us against them, right? So this is where I go back to integration. What's happening right now is the integration, not just of all of our emotions, but the integration also of our humanity and the metaphysical, the spiritual, the cosmos. This is the integration of earth and spirit, of human and the divine, of ego and soul. Everything has to begin to work together in collaboration. I think this was something that Richard Rudd said in his book as well, is that if cells, we have a trillion, how many cells do we have? 30 trillion? I don't know, a ridiculous amount of cells in our body. He's like, we would not survive if they were in competition. And that's a whole other illusion and fallacy. And now the whole biology and science is actually oh, dope, we got that a bit wrong. Things are not in competition. They're actually in collaboration. It's not a competition for the sperm to get to the egg. They're in collaboration to support the strongest to get to the egg. It's a totally different perspective. And remember what I've shared before is that your reality is completely influenced by your perspective, which is influenced by your beliefs. So we have to be really careful. What do we believe in? Because that's how we'll perceive reality. And boy, can it look very, very different from one view and perspective from the other to the other based on the belief. We can either see something as competitive or we can see it as collaborative. And it changes the entire story of existence. So basically what he was saying is, if all of these trillions and trillions of cells were in competition, our body wouldn't function. It has to work together. It has to work together. Why would humans be any different? Look at what's happened when we don't collaborate. And the sad thing is that we've been pinned against one another because it weakens us. It literally weakens like if you think of maybe we are all cells of some greater organism, which is the universe, just as our cells are this whole collaboration and millions of trillions of communities that are making up us as one single human being, as within, so without, as above, so below, right? It's all one and the same. So we've got to stop fighting against ourselves and against each other. And if we want to stop fighting each other, we have to stop fighting what is going on inside of us. Do we want to get to a point where we can evolve beyond being in those states of anger too much? Not because it's like, oh, that's bad, but just so that we don't have to stay in the suffering of it anymore. But as I've been speaking about, we have to go in and through in order to really rise to the next level of our own ascension. We have to look at the shadow. There's just no way. We can't bypass this. And actually, I've never liked the word transcend because to me, it always had the connotation that it's like, I'm going to fly over and above all of this shit. I'm going to sweep it under the rug and I'm going to transcend it. I'm just going to transcend it. Right? And to me, it was like, oh my God, there's so much denial in that. But what Richard Rudd said is transcendence is I forget exactly his term, but you have to go into it. You have to go into it before you can transcend it. And that's when I'm like, okay, yes, that I do get. That I do agree with. Because transcendence cannot be bypassing. Transcendence to me would almost be the transmutation. You become the alchemist. You alchemize the very thing, but it's not through neglect or denial, right? So we can get to these points where maybe we don't have to experience so much anger and that kind of more base chakra emotions. But we have to go through that part first in order to truly, truly come into the light of day. In the gene keys, each gene key has its shadow, its gift, and its siddhi. And that's the progression, right? First, you have to make aware the shadow and to understand, okay, what is the shadow showing me? What is the challenge here? What is the lesson? That is the point of growth. The shadow is always the opportunity for us to grow. And if we take that challenge on and we're really present and we're honest and we're authentic with it and we embrace it, then we receive the gift. And then if you really fully embody the gift, and a lot of it is how we most naturally come into a state of service, because I really do believe that human beings are innately compassionate and want to be of service. And when we take our gift and we are of service to humanity and to the whole, then we reach what, the siddhi is really like the state of enlightenment, where we almost, quote unquote, transcend our humanity. And we really come back into our spiritual being, not just our human being, but our spiritual being. This is a returning home. Now, of course, you have to believe that home is not just your house and this body and this lifetime. And at the end of it, you're dead and that's it. Home is returning to the remembrance of who you truly, truly are, which is an infinite soul. You are a spiritual being. And I mean that in a very simple way. It doesn't have to be fluffy or all woke. It's not any of that. And it's not that you have to become something that is better than you. You're stripping the layers back to just go back to who you truly are, that you came into this life as that. And that essence is always there as the canvas. Right? Remember the analogy that I've shared. So, where do I want to go with this? One thing, I love this. I love when it's like, see, this is another thing. If I were to stay stuck in my mind there, I'd be like, oh my God, I've lost my train of thought. What am I going to say? Luckily, I don't have that. fear at all, because what happens is that it's like, oh, it's okay to be quiet for a moment. Because what happens is in the quiet, I become still. And in the stillness, I can hear. And I've really been tuning into stillness over these last couple months. Of really, it hasn't been this energy of like, do, create, make it happen. We were in Mercury retrograde for 3 weeks. It felt like 3 months, 3 years. But I was really like, you know what? I'm not going to push anything. I'm not going to try. I'm not going to force. I might dip my toe in here, but if it doesn't flow, I'm going to just pull back. I'm going to take my foot off of the pedal. And I've really been learning this state of being, coming back into being and coming back into stillness and coming back into silence and really listening and really tuning in and really trusting flow. What if life was perfectly orchestrated and that my job was to be present and still enough so that I can listen and hear and follow the flow rather than I'm going to try and make it happen, right? I'm going to force it to make it happen. That's what we've been taught to do because we haven't been in tune with nature. We haven't been in tune with the rhythm. We haven't been in tune with the flow because we've been so far removed and pulled away from all that is natural because we've been told you are not nature. So Pam Gregory, she left a beautiful, she spoke about a beautiful quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, and I wish I could remember. It was something actually I was going to look at before doing the podcast, and I totally forgot. But it was something about coming into stillness, like be in stillness. Because from stillness is where everything is born. It's where the most beautiful things arise. Everything. It's like going back to the void, that stillness, that darkness. And then there was light. And then there was creation. And the darkness is the yin, the feminine, right? The womb seems like it's dark, but that is the point of all creation, whether you're creating a child or a creative project, creative inspiration, creative thought, a manifestation. It comes from the darkness. It comes from the stillness. It comes from the silence. And so I loved how she was talking about we're just being asked to be in stillness right now, to not react, to not become reactive. Come back to stillness, come back to silence. And so I love these kind of synchronicities of okay, I'm we're tuning into the same antenna, into the same radio station, right? Now, another example of this interconnectivity and this integration into all things, recognizing that we are the cosmos, from chaos to cosmos. Yesterday, I had a really frustrating day. I have these few days off to myself from my daughter, and it's the first time that I've had some days off to myself for over 2 months. And so a part of that is I want to rest, but also I need to do my website because it's been down for over a month. And it's like, oh, okay, I finally have the time. And yesterday, a friend of mine so generously kind of set me up with a theme. And so I went in and I was starting to kind of look at it, but it's a different theme builder. I'm not used to it. And it was really like, well, I got to the point where it's quite overwhelming. And just to do the littlest thing, I couldn't really quite get it because I'm used to using a totally different system. And literally hours went by and it was neither productive or restful, right? I'm like, okay, here I am. I've wasted a day. And I haven't rested and just taken time for myself, but I also haven't been productive. So I felt really kind of upset with myself. And I almost went into a panic, actually. It was really kind of an interesting observation where I just went into the overwhelm, and that triggered, I felt really alone in that moment of like, oh my God, I'm holding too much and I just need help and support right now. And then I did what I know always makes me feel better is I grabbed all my stuff and I went to the sea. So I was feeling this energy of like overwhelm and kind of, chaos, and things were just not in order and they weren't working. And it was like my brain felt like scrambled eggs and my energetic field felt just like strung out in a way. It was like, bzzz, chaotic. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the sea. The sea gives me calm. And what do I find when I get there? The sea is in chaos. She's wild. Normally it's like placid and serene and peaceful. She is wild. There are waves crashing against the stones. It's windy. And I thought, that's so interesting. So if we're connected, was my mood being mimicked by the sea, or was the sea mimicking my mood? One and the same, right? It's the chicken and the egg dilemma. Which one came first? But it was actually really beautiful because I got there and I'm like, oh, this is reflecting what I'm feeling. And I did a video around this of like, sometimes when you're feeling something, it's not even necessarily yours. You might be feeling into the collective consciousness. You might be feeling into something that's happening cosmologically or astrologically or something that's in the air. Or this is what I mean by we need to zoom out and expand into that we're connected to so much more than we think. We're not just this tiny body, and we're certainly not just this little brain, and we're certainly not just the left part of the brain, right? That's an oversimplification of this beautifully complex system that we are, right? We're not just a part of that, we are. And so I had this experience of going there and being like, wow, yeah, okay, she's wild too today. There's chaos in her too today. And what's beautiful about the sea is she's not judging herself. She's not judging her chaos. She's not judging her wildness. She's not judging, like we could go, oh, there's her anger, there's her fury, or there's her whatever. And I actually plunged myself into the kind of wildness. And in her wildness, in her chaos, I found calm. And it was so beautiful. It was that, okay, I get to be wild with her. I get to be chaotic with her. I get to be in that kind of frenzy with her. And in that, because there's a letting go, there's no judgment. In that, there's peace. So that's just a reminder, an example, and an invitation really to just begin to see yourself as all that is. If you want to begin by seeing yourself as a part of it, then of course it's really integrating into it so that there is no separation. But I think that's some like mastery level shit. The invitation is begin to see that you are a part of all things. Begin to see that there's a beautiful divine orchestration of all things. Begin to see that all parts of you, there's a purpose for it. And take it as an invitation to listen and pay attention to and ask questions and be curious and be compassionate and be patient and be still. So that you can feel into all of these things, that you can drop into a state of being. We are changing what it means to be a human being right now. As Pam says, we are becoming spiritual beings, which is getting us closer to home. Now, I like the stay rooted in reality. Keep your feet on the ground. You're still having a human experience. I'm not asking you to transcend it in the way that sometimes spiritual bypassing can mean, right? You have to go in and through in order to ascend. It's not an escape. It's an evolution, right? So just begin to shift your focus into one that is more holistic, into one that is connected to all things. And what would it be to fall into flow, to really profoundly trust the flow of your life and don't force things to happen if they're not happening? I feel like I've finally come to that place after a year of experiencing the fear and anxiety of not finding home. I still have to find somewhere to move for October. Like, this story still isn't over, friends. But the fear isn't there anymore. And actually, that's one of my gene keys, is like when I can profoundly trust the flow of my life, things will come in with ease because we're not fighting against it. We're not fighting against ourselves. We're not losing energy on something that we don't need to give our energy to. It's such a waste of time. It's so tiring and it doesn't help. It's never helped to freak out. Now, if you freak out, that's okay. Don't have judgment over it. That's, I think, part of moving through the shadow to the gift, right? As an analogy, as a metaphor, we have to go through our humanity to really come into that greater state of like the soul, the oversoul that can be that neutral witness, that compassionate witness. And we can learn to embody that, but we have to move through the first stage first. So if you freak out, Allow it, be with it, have compassion for it, be curious about it, love it, hold it, embrace it. This is the inclusion. This is the integration. You're not fragmenting, you're not separating, you're not getting rid of. We're coming into wholeness by acceptance, allowing, embracing, loving, inclusion, integration of all things. Then we can ascend. Then we can evolve. So going back to the beginning and speaking about anger, anger is an invitation. It's the invitation to go in and pay attention. And the art of forgiveness that we learn along the way is that softening of getting out of the judgment of our humanity. It's a humbling, it's a loving. Forgiveness to me is a softening. It's a loosening of the grip that the fist that wants to just punch, right? So the invitation is just to become aware and to recognize how you are a part of all things, and that all parts that you feel and experience are a part of you too. And you can alchemize them, you can transmute them, but you have to include them first. So looking through the lens of wholeness rather than fragmentation, of connection rather than separation, of inclusion rather than division and fragmentation. And coming into, if it feels right, I'm assuming if you're here listening to this podcast, you probably do resonate in a certain way, that you're not just a human being, but you're a spiritual being. You're not just of the earth, but you're also of the cosmos. You know, stardust is within us. Begin to see the interconnectivity of all things, including yourself. This is the path back home. This is the path back to liberation, and therefore peace and joy and beauty and bliss. And I'll leave you with, goodness, I hope I can remember Richard Rudd saying that life, what is it? That life requires beauty and beauty requires life. It's not the right word, but they're one and the same. And I really like that. You know, if you can see that all of life is this kind of beautiful painting, it becomes beautiful. And when you see that things are beautiful, it creates life. So remember that you are a beautiful piece of art, cosmic art, expressing itself in this wild and unique game of life. All right, I'll leave it at that. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.